Came to New Zealand. So I stopped teaching in 1974 and came to New Zealand in 1977. For my first years in New Zealand, I didn't work. My children were quite young, and I did come and see Fran Elkin about doing some part-time teaching, and but at the time that didn't seem to be on, and so I thought, well, that's all right, I'll just enjoy my children. And then by chance, a friend of my husband's who was a rheumatologist said he was doing some research into the use of naproxen, and he would love to have a physiotherapist actually do the muscle testing to see whether the drug was beneficial or not. And so I started work again in a research capacity. It was only one morning a week, seeing these people who were randomized to either naproxen or the new drug was actually a drug called Feldene, and in those days they didn't use placebo as much, but the naproxen was the gold standard, and so any new drug was measured against the gold standard rather than against nothing at all. And so the advantage of Feldene was that it was a once-a-day drug, whereas naproxen in those days was twice a day. And so I came back into the fold of physiotherapy in a rather devious way, and I did that for probably about 3 years. I did several of the drug studies, and then one of the interesting studies was actually on the green lip mussel and its use in arthritis. And that was funded actually by Macfarlane Laboratories, who produced the green lip mussel extract, and it wouldn't be acceptable today to have the drug company actually funding it. But what we found was that, in fact, the green lip mussel extract was no better than placebo. And so although we were funded by the laboratory, we actually didn't find in their favour. And one of the difficulties of that trial was that because they actually didn't know the active ingredient in the green lip mussel, it was very difficult to extract it. And so some people did seem to do quite well, but others didn't. And there was a feeling that it might have been because the extract wasn't always very good in every capsule. And I believe that even now, this would have been probably about 1980 when we were doing these trials, but even now you do see the green lip mussel advocated for use in arthritis, so they may have perfected the extract. So I did that and enjoyed it actually. It gave me a taste of research, but very much in a handmaiden capacity, but it did make me very much aware of some of the pitfalls of research. And so it did generate some interest in it. And then I was asked by Barbara Miller, who was the clinical coordinator at the time at it was called, not AUT in those days, it was called the ATI, yes, if I would like to do some clinical supervision in cardiorespiratory. And although I had been not practicing for quite some time, I actually had done as part of my in part of my teaching capacity, I had actually done some research on COPD and using breathing techniques. And because as part of my teaching, I'd had some association with the Brompton Hospital, where they were then starting to use active cycle of breathing techniques. So I had had some exposure to that. And so when I came back and then did some clinical supervision, I'd actually found that quite a lot hadn't changed very much, even though I had been away from that sort of cardiorespiratory area for a little bit of time. They were still doing foot and ankle exercises, they were still doing deep breathing exercises, they were using the active cycle of breathing technique for sputum clearance, but fortuitously Jocelyn Ross and Elizabeth can't think of her name published their paper on the importance of getting people out of bed early, and so I was very much in the sort of forefront of advocating that in treatment in New Zealand, and I do feel that I was responsible for getting rid of foot and ankle exercises once we started people getting out of bed. And Jocelyn Ross and I had a very long discussion about the use of it, and she then agreed that actually doing 10 foot and ankle exercises without resistance was probably not that useful. And so I do feel that I achieved something there. And so I came back to teaching via clinical supervision, and I did that for some time. My clinical base was usually at Middlemore, and I had a very good working relationship with the staff there, and I enjoyed that time very much. It then, there was a teaching post became available, and I applied for that, and then came back full-time into teaching, teaching the cardiorespiratory syllabus, and then became also responsible for organising the clinical placements for students in the Auckland area. So I think, yes, that was, so I came back into teaching sort of through the clinical route, really.